Welcome to the Down Dog Athletics Podcast, a competitor's guide to mental health and mastery. My name is Paul Clean. I've known sports and training my entire life, but it wasn't until I worked on my mind that I finally started achieving what I believed I was capable of. When I combined mindful and spiritual practices to my already competitive demeanor, I gained a new level of clarity in life and traded my career at Amazon to start Down Dog Athletics. In this podcast, I interview top athletes and coaches to uncover the mindsets of top performers. You'll hear from doctors, authors, and experts in the health space as they break down how to take your mental health, physical health, and performance to the next level. And last but not least, you'll hear from me in my experiences and how I'm cultivating growth for myself and my clients, both mentally and physically. Let's go. What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Mindful Muscle Podcast, a competitor's guide to mental health and mastery. My name is Paul Klingon, and I am your host. And I hope you guys are all having an awesome day. We've got an awesome guest on the podcast today, Coach Cody Smith, that's what he goes by on Instagram, but he is the CEO and owner of Virtuous Fitness Washington, as well as conjoined with the building Pacific Northwest Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, which is actually really cool because we had not had a martial artist on the podcast ever before. And so we have a lot of cool conversations around that style of exercise, fitness, and training, and his approach and his thought process about what martial arts is to him is a really cool perspective. And so he shares his story and all the different trials and tribulations he's gone through as a gym owner. He's got a huge, I think, 10,000 square foot space. And so anyone in the fitness industry knows how hard it is to work and build up to that point. And so you're going to hear him talk about fitness. You're going to hear him talk about family. You're going to hear him talk about martial arts. And so I'm really excited for him to come on and talk about this podcast. And he's actually going to get right into the 75 Hard program that he did, which is Andy Frisella's. If you've ever listened to the MFCEO podcast, Andy Frisella has a really hard challenge, the 75 Hard program. We're just going to run right into the podcast where he's talking about his experience with that, and you'll see right away just how intense and passionate and hardworking Cody is. Really excited for you guys to listen to this episode. Here we go. What reservations did you have going into it, and what was the hardest part?
I'm always looking for like the next level of like, what can I do like mentally, right? For this entire year with COVID has completely changed like who I am fundamentally as a person, how I show up as a leader, how I am as a father. And I attribute it partly to like my hand being forced, but I've always kind of actively seeked ways to be challenged and ways to like to level up per se. I mean, that's how you and I landed in the same, mastermind for what, almost 2 years or something like that. Like we're always looking to level up. And, when COVID came along, I kind of viewed myself as like, like I'm the general, right? Like I'm the one that's kind of running everything. And for the most part, like I didn't know this at the time, but I was a peacetime general. Right. I hadn't yet stepped into wartime general. Now, wartime general is when you get like, we talked about this before, we got into it, is like wartime general is when you're making decisions now and you're under scrutiny constantly. That's when you're meeting resistance to some of your decisions. That's when you're making decisions that, would crush the normal person who isn't trying to be better. And, when I stepped into wartime general, it kind of leveled me up. And then I got to a place where the decisions I was making, the conversations I had to have. And for me, like I used to shy away from really tough conversations. I would never challenge a person directly. And now there's an art to it, right? Like having to challenge somebody directly and not, offending or, coming across a certain way. So once I like got to where I did these conversations a lot, I was able to deliver them very good, right? Like I was able to have the hard conversations and create this, the book Crucial Conversations talks about like creating the mutual pool of understanding, right?
Yeah.
I got very good at that. And then, I felt kind of idle. And then, like I said, I was out cutting the grass and I look at pretty much any time that I'm doing one thing, if it's not something I have to really focus on, it's also an opportunity for me to learn and for me to listen to something. And so I was listening to that podcast where he was talking about it. And for me, it was like, this could be like a cool little challenge. Like I struggle to get 4 workouts in per week, right? Like let alone doing 14 sessions, like 4 sessions alone was crushing me. So I was like, man, that's the one thing that I don't know that I'll be able to do. Reading 10 pages was another very simple thing. Like I finished 4 books, during 75 Hard. just because like I would read 10 pages and then want to go more, and you know, drinking water and all these things of like man, I've got to get this done no matter what, was like the next level of me training my mind. I mean, and there were some nights where, man, there was one day we bought a wake surfing boat last year, and I had taken the boat to the service shop all the way out in gosh, Issaquah, and came all the way back. I got home. It was like 10 p.m. at night. I still needed to do another 45-minute workout. And it was that time where it was like, this is the decision I make here is going to transfer over to decisions I make later. So it was like, okay, I could go get in my bed. I'm exhausted. I've been driving for the past several hours. Um, I've got a little bit of water left before I finish my gallon, or I can throw my weight vest on, I can throw on my headlamp, and I can go out and I can walk. And obviously I went out and I did that and I finished it, but that was just like one of the small instances along that 75 hard journey to where like I really had to dig deep and like, what am I worth? Like I tell people to do hard stuff, right? My motto on my letterboard in our house, that is our like family mantra, is Smith do hard things. Am I really going to do a hard thing right here? And for me to like walk the walk and be able to talk the talk is very empowering as a leader and as a coach, as a father, as a husband, because like when I'm challenging my kids to do difficult things, I know that I've got that thing to fall back on of like, I do that. I did it for 75 days. And now I kind of do it. I've gone on and done phase 1, which is like you add in a cold shower. Um, you have to do like 8 critical tasks that move you forward every day. Like that was another challenging thing. Like we're on well water in our house. Who wants to get frozen by well water for 5 minutes? And I'm a dude too, right? So you know what that means. Like it's not super
Yeah.
comfortable down low, right? So, but who wants to do that every day for 30 days? Nobody. But if you do that, something as frivolous as like somebody calling me irresponsible because of the decisions I made during COVID, it's almost laughable at best, right? Because you've done all these hard things. So I recommend it to everybody. Some people go into it thinking it's like a fitness program. It is not a fitness program. It is purely like, can you do these lists of things every single day when you don't want to, when you have no aspirations to do anything? Can you get it done? And if you can say yes 75 times without messing up one time, I think you definitely come out as a better person on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there any reservations you had about the 2 days, knowing just like how hard 4 days was and knowing just how much from a recovery standpoint, like how it's almost like if you didn't know what you know about training and recovery, it might
Mhm.
almost be easier just be like, oh yeah, like this is what you go and do.
I did have reservations. I thought for sure I was going to overtrain, just because, like you said, with jujitsu, with the things that I do, I have to be very careful with. I'm a dad. Sometimes I sleep 4 hours in a night because my kid's up, 72 times, and we have a husky puppy now, and as she's like chewing my shoe under me, you know what I mean? Like there's always these things that keep me from doing what I need to do, and a lot of times that's sleep. So I had to be very careful with what I chose for my activities, right? And I heard Andy talking about like he would do walks a lot of times, and he walked so much that he got blisters on his feet. Like I experienced some of that, right? Because we live on a road that's a perfect mile, but the first like 30 yards of it are straight up. Like we live up on top of a hill, and walking that in the middle of the night in a weight vest with a headlamp on, it's not easy, right? So I would be very, at first I was like, okay, I'm going to lift weights for one of them, and do some, my functional fitness stuff. And then I'm going to run the other one. And then I quickly realized that like, that's not going to happen. So it was like walking some days, other days I would like find ways to play with my kids to where I'd be kind of active the whole time. Like, hey, we're going to start playing football. Dad's got to do it for 45 minutes. And they're like, whatever, dad, totally cool with us. So I'm like running around in the backyard with my kids playing football, but that was like my activity. And, other days I could do like a walk in jujitsu. Like I was just very cautious of, what I felt like. Right. And I wear the whoop strap too. A lot of people wear the whoop strap and they're like, I'm not going to listen to any of the data. I'm just going to wear it because it looks cool. If I had a red day or a yellow recovery day, I wouldn't train hard the next day. I would do 2 walks. Right.
Right.
But it was always, weight vested just to add that element to it. And I always had to walk my road because I know that those hills were, um, it for me to consider it exercise, it had to be challenging mentally to me. And if it wasn't, then I'd be like, that didn't count. And I would
Yeah,
do something else.
for sure. You said a couple things that were really interesting. One, you're like Smiths do hard things, and you're like, how am I going to tell my boys, you know, when life gets tough, you got to be tough back. And that was actually kind of a thought I had with myself where I was like, COVID's happening. 40 years from now, my kids or grandkids are going to be like, oh, like, Papa, like, what did you do during COVID? And that's what inspired me to run the marathon. How much of like, were you having these conversations with your kid? Like, hey, like, things are weird right now. Things are hard. Like, maybe you're not going to school as much. But it sounds like that was a pretty big motivating factor as well to be able to say, like, hey, like, I walk the walk, I talk the talk, and it is this really tough time, but I'm just going to rise above it.
Mm-hmm. Um, a driver of that was for sure. Like, that for me, like I'm a dad, right? And I take that job very seriously. And um, I know that there are a lot of things going on in the world that I wholeheartedly disagree with, right? So doing hard things for me is an opportunity to teach my boys skills that they might not get in school. They might not get it from their teachers. They might not get it from their friends or their friends' parents. If I can just teach them the the ability to handle adversity and to turn it into something, um, I just think that's a life skill, right? I just have this opinion that the person that can handle adversity and learn the most, and the person that can communicate the best, is typically going to be the most successful, right? And if I can give them that adversity piece, I know they're not going to get. I mean, things are easy, right? And for me, a lot of the adversity that I've met in my life is the reason why I have had some of the success that I've had now. But with that, there's like this saying, I forget how it goes. It's like, hard times make strong men make good times make weak men make hard times. Right. So we're kind of going, I hope if somebody listening to this, if I just butcher that, I'm sorry. I try to just kind of regurgitate, right?
Get a whiteboard and do the math on the whiteboard.
But ultimately it's like, for my sons, like now that, I've done well and we have a nice house and we have nice things, and they have a bunch of really good people to be around. Now it's like, where is that adversity going to come from for them? So it's like, what kind of lessons can I teach them that I'm learning that allow them to meet a little adversity? Like right now, my son is on a select baseball team and he sat the bench for 2 games. He has never sat the bench in any of his baseball. He's always been the talented kid. And for me, it's like, as a dad, I'm like, yeah, you're going to learn now. Like, now you've got to learn that your talent's not good enough. Now you have to work hard with your talent. Um, so yeah, the doing hard things is I think that's a skill that, in my opinion, like, men need to have, and my boys need to have, and hopefully that'll lead them to being successful in some capacity later.
Yeah. I think you'll do a great job, and you've obviously done a great job of showing them, like, hey, here's how you handle adversity. Speaking of what you've gone through over the course of your life and your journey, we don't have to hash out everything, right? It's been a long journey, at least in the fitness space. But what were different points in your life where you're like, man, I'm really glad like I got over that hump? And how did you do that? Whether that's like joining the Navy, whether that's having gyms and just like scraping by to get to where you're at now with Virtuous Fitness.
It's funny. I was just sitting and thinking about this the other day, and I actually talked about it a little bit on my story last night on Instagram. It's like, I'm sitting in my gym, and we had just finished jujitsu for the evening, and I'm just looking at the mat. It's clean. It's fresh smell of bleach in the air. For me, for a jujitsu person, awkwardly, you're like, oh, I like that. Like, that's good, right? It's like a calming thing for whatever reason. Don't judge me if you're listening to this, guys. I apologize. It is what it is. But I'm looking at that, and then my jujitsu studio is also connected to the fitness studio, and we're about 9,000 square feet or something like that. Like, and I'm looking at this warehouse, and I didn't coach at all on the other side. I didn't do any teaching. I've got an amazing team of coaches that handles things and takes care of our members. And I just finished jujitsu, and it's one of the few times where I'm sitting in the gym and I'm by myself, and it's quiet, right? Usually there's people there all the time, but there used to be hours during the day where I would just be sitting there by myself scheming about, like, what am I going to do to help somebody get better? What am I going to do to grow my business? I'd be sitting on a box with my laptop on another box, and I'm like, watching videos and posting on social media and writing blogs. And that's how I spent years. Right. But it's funny when I look at that, because it wasn't always that. I mean, our gym started in the second story of the martial arts studio that I did mixed martial arts at. I had spent some time in the Navy. I actually got pushed out of the Navy because I was part of this initiative, with, the Navy started getting downsized and stuff like that. And I was a part of a contract that was inside of this initiative to start to downsize, and I got pushed out, right? I was pissed. I was angry. I was frustrated. I thought I was going to spend 20 years in the Navy. And so I got pushed out, no job, no career, had no idea what I was going to do. Did some time working with a moving company, did some work with Lowe's, to where I would like do ceiling fan installations inside of the store. You go in Lowe's and there's like the ceiling fan displays and they're hanging from this white rack. There's people that put those up in the middle of the night, and I was the guy, right? I did that. I worked for a landscaping company, and then ended up landing a job with a company called Raytheon, which was a government contract. And I was doing the same thing for Raytheon that I did when I was in the Navy. And I remember the first few years it was great, and then I started to notice that some of the leadership was very terrible. And I had ascended the ladder a little bit. I'd gotten to a assistant supervisor position, and then when the leadership kind of led us into this path to where we were in a contract bid with another company and we lost. So I actually got laid off, right? And when I got rehired again, because it's funny, when they change the contracts, one company picks up your paycheck, the other one takes it over with all their changes. Or one person drops your paycheck, the other one takes it over with all the changes. And when the other one picked it up, I had lost my pay. I had huge pay decrease. I lost my supervisor assistant position, and I was back on the floor. And then they put the person that was, in my opinion, the worst leader out of all of us in charge of, all of the contractors that I work directly with. And I was very frustrated. During that time, my wife and I were getting a divorce. I was fighting a custody battle and running this gym on the side. And if you had asked me back then, like looking at where I'm at now, that that I would end up here, I would have laughed at you, because in that state, I was like, this is what life is, right? I am the divorced with a kid, paying child support, paying alimony, at a job I hate, and my business is the worst, right? Like I'm literally in a dingy second story attic space trying to run a CrossFit program. And I kept plugging away, kept just, pushing forward. Ended up started to date who's my wife now, Megan. And she was, I call her like the pendulum, right? Like she kind of swung me in the other direction, in the sense that it was the first time where I wasn't okay with, you know, who I was, what level of person I was. We actually had gone out with some of her friends. They were doctors, they were nurses, they were um, physician's assistants, like all these high level people. And I'm the broke government contractor with no money. I'm paying for my dinner to hang out with these people on a credit card that I can't pay. Like it was just this weird thing. And um, we went to this place where we were eating crab and stuff like that. And then my truck got pulled around, and I had a spare on my truck. And these people that were also getting their car valeted around that we were with were Audis, Mercedes, just these high dollar cars. And in that moment, like I was going to get in that truck, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, this is what I'm doing. I have a 2004 Ford Explorer Sport Track that has a donut on it. I'm picking up my beautiful girlfriend, who doesn't even care that I'm driving this, really. But I started to feel inferior for the first time. Now, some people would say like, oh, that's a negative thing. But for me, it was very positive, because it forced me to be like, got to do something about it, right? So this led to a lifelong chase of information where, daily I made it a practice to where podcasting was going to happen, reading was going to happen. And then, book after book, podcast after podcast, started attending like live in-person events and seminars, got coaching for the first time. And, I just started to level up a little bit at a time, and we moved from Virginia to Washington State. I had to close up my gym that I had going in Virginia. That was, it started to grow. I had, around 100 members. And then when we moved to Washington State, I had to start all over again. And then much of the same, just kept reading, kept growing. Now I was in a weird place to where I couldn't find a place to restart my gym. And, just right place at the right time, met some gymnasts. They introduced me to the owner of their gymnastics facility. He allowed me to open up there, and more of the same, just kept plugging away, kept working. And, now fast forward several years, and I'm living. I'm actually in kind of this weird place right now, and I've actually talked to my coach a ton about this, that sometimes I almost feel bored because I've kind of done everything I've wanted to do, but because we're entrepreneurs, we want more, we want to expand more, we want to do more stuff. Now, because I've achieved a lot of the things that I need to achieve, I'm starting to look more outwardly, to right, like where can I provide more impact outwardly? Looking to possibly, I don't know, you care if I talk about like religious stuff on
Yeah, that's totally fine.
here. So I'm looking right now to be a board member on a local company called YFC, which is Youth for Christ, and they actually work with underprivileged youth in our area. And I want to be a board member because, financially I can help out, and I could be the fitness and nutrition guy for these kids that know nothing of this type of stuff, right? I could teach them martial arts. I could talk to them about, personal development and mindset and being a better person. But it's because I've done all this stuff that I said I was going to do business wise. Now it's how can I provide impact outside of that? So I don't know if that's what you wanted. I feel like I went on a ton of tangents, but the journey's been kind of crazy, but all of them, I believe, really shaped me into being a person, that can be in this position to help other people, I guess.
Yeah, there's like a little sentence in there that really stood out to me, and it was like you said a lot of times you compared yourself to those people, or you're in an environment where you're comparing yourself, and like a lot of times people are like comparison is negative, and right, comparison is the thief of joy. A lot of people feel bad about themselves on social media, but in that particular instant, and I think there's a lot of instances that comparison can be a trampoline if you utilize it in the right way,
Mm.
right? And really, when you said Sarah, right? Sarah is like kind of this pendulum. She put you in this
Megan.
Megan, sorry.
Mhm.
To put you in this environment to where it's like you had to heat up,
Mhm.
right? So I thought that was really cool. And then to the other point, it's like you've done all these things. I want to get into that a little bit on just like as you're growing the jujitsu studio, the gym, family, three boys, like how you balance all that. But I always like to say is like there's a lot of not good people that have a lot of power and money, right? And they're out there pulling the strings. And so it's like to be able to get to a point to where it's like, great, now I can be like this Thor to this evil superhero. And it's like, now you've got this power to be
Mhm.
able to go and create a really cool and positive change in a lot of really cool different ways. So super cool. To that point, how do you manage a jiu-jitsu studio, a gym, multiple team members, three kids, right? You got a husky. I was looking up. I watched Togo. I don't know if you've seen that on
Oh no.
Disney. It's so Balto is the dog that's like famous for doing the
Sure.
Alaska run. It was actually a dog named Togo. Balto is just like the last dog to finish the run. Togo is the dog that did like 400 of the 600 miles, and it was much harder. So anyway, they like
Wow.
redid the movie, and I was like, oh, I want a Siberian Husky. But anyway, like
Yeah.
how do you go about managing all that and making sure that relationships aren't suffering, your health and your training isn't suffering, business isn't suffering? Is it a wave of seasons where one's getting more focused, or is it like you got six pots on the stove and you're constantly just like a DJ, like giving each one a little bit of attention?
Um, full transparency, it's an ever evolving thing, and obviously I'm super critical of myself, and I think that I can do better. This year, in my opinion, has been probably the hardest on families that, and this is something that people are missing right now, is like, I'm a very busy professional. My wife is a nurse at the hospital, and I run two businesses. I have 12 team members that need me at any given time. I have hundreds of clients. And this isn't like, look at Cody, he's crushing it. This is purely like there's a lot of weight that pulls at me and that needs me, especially during COVID when, and your clients are struggling, right? It's hard to stay out of the news, and with the election stuff that was going on, and like it, it, it was extremely challenging for me. But then my children were experiencing this thing to where like they couldn't see their friends. Right? My oldest son is the most active kid in our family, and he always used to playing football and baseball and flag football and jujitsu, and like he's just very busy, and all those things were taken from him. And you know that is one of those things to where people are missing that, like kids are suffering. Like my family was having a hard time because we needed to be in 20 places at one time and we couldn't. And for me, the way that I balanced all of those things was making sure that in my day every day that each one of those things got time, right? When and I actually kind of stole this from you're familiar with Jason Khalipa, correct?
Hmm.
So Jason Khalipa has this thing where he calls it the Amrap mentality, and what he says about that is that when you're very similar to CrossFit, when you're doing one thing, you're AMRAPing that thing. When you're in a 10-minute circuit, you're not thinking about anything with that 10-minute circuit. But then when you do move on to your next day, you're lifting or whatever it may be, all you're thinking about is like that lifting and that stuff that you're doing. So for me, I took that and I really try to approach it in that way, to where, the mornings are my time. That's when I'm going to journal, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to read, I'm going to study, I'm going to do things that fill my brain up, because at 8 a.m. when my kids start to roll out of bed, it's go time. From 8 to 9, it's the breakfast kid routine. We're getting kids ready for school. And you heard a lot of this stuff when we used to sit in mastermind, and I'm like, yo, my head's exploding. Um, 8 to 9, the kids are doing their thing. And then I'm working from 9:30 roughly until doing podcasts, writing content, recording my own show, like creating, coaching people on the floor, coaching private client. Like it's just all these things are going on. But my work time, a few days a week is 9:30 until about 5 p.m. But when I get home, I have this thing called the unplug box. I take my phone, I make sure my wife and my family see me do it, and I put it in the box. Now, is it perfect? No. Sometimes I have it out and I'm like, look, babe, I've got to finish this thing up real quick. Give me some time. But, for the most part, I put it away or I put it face down, and I know that it's kid and family time. I make it a point to where, like, right when I get home, like, especially now that it's starting to get nicer outside and stuff like that, like, let's go outside. The other day I took my kids out, let's go jump on the trampoline. We're on the trampoline for an hour. My wife's by herself. She went downstairs and ended up working out and stuff like that. But it was kid time. And then at night, it's her. I think the biggest balance piece, and what I would offer is, a way for people who are in a situation like mine, is like making sure that you are extremely clear on what's a priority to you and what's a non-negotiable. And then all the other things that aren't as important, ultimately, sometimes they're just not going to get done that day. And for the entrepreneur type, for the A-type personality, it's really hard to be like, no, that's getting done today. I don't care if it's 11 p.m., but it'll be there tomorrow. And that's something I struggle with for a long time too, of knowing, like, I'm going to shut off at this time, I'm going to start at this time, going to sleep at this time. I've got to get my training in. Sometimes does it get thrown to the side because something more important happens? Absolutely. But for the most part, that's what I try to stick to. And I'll add another layer just because I want to be 100% transparent. COVID sometimes, with this lockdown and my kids still aren't, my middle son just started going to school for 2 hours a day. Now I've got to take him to the bus stop twice a day. So if I'm at the gym, that means I drive home, get him on the bus, I go back to the gym, I come back, I pick him up. So there's like, now it's car time. My son just started up baseball. So now we've got baseball 4 days this week, right? So that means I've got to make sure we get him to practice and I pick him up at night. So there's added layers to it. And then when my kids were 100% remote, there was daily battles with getting your work done. But I think that, I guess, the best piece of advice, like I said, would be very clear on what's important, be very clear on what's less important, and then try to allocate time to it every day. And know that sometimes it's just going to not be perfect. And if you are supporting and I know you're a big proponent of mental health, like, I think if you spend enough time focusing on making sure that you're good, like you're good mentally, like I said, every morning I have time for me, like that time for me, I can wake up anxious and stressed out, but by the end of that time, I'm good. I'm ready to move on to the next thing. And if you prioritize that, I think all the other stuff will kind of lay in. But I would 100% be lying to you and your audience if I was like, I got it all figured out, because I don't. But it's an evolving thing that I try to make sure that I'm handling all of the capacities as best as I can.
Hey guys, this is Paul here, just popping in really quick to let you know about a new program that I'm going to be launching. Actually, I'm not going to be launching it. We're going to be doing version 2.0. It is the Mindful Muscle 8-Week Challenge. We launched the first one in February. The group is just now finishing, and April 19th is going to be the launch date for the new challenge. What is in the challenge, you're asking? Well, you're going to get a customized training program in the Down Dog Athletics app. That's a given. You're going to get nutrition coaching, 6 different recipe books, whether you're low carb, high protein, don't want to pulled together a bunch of ingredients. We got 5 ingredients or less, vegan, vegetarian, bunch of different recipe books with meal plans and shopping lists. But on top of that, we're going to have weekly group coaching calls where I'm going to take you through a curriculum of education around training 101, nutrition 101, metabolism 101, really long form Q&As for you to be able to ask questions around topics specific to these different things within the curriculum. And that's all going to be housed within a private community on a Facebook group. But on top of that, we're adding a book club. We're going to be going through Turning Pro by Stephen Pressfield, one of the biggest life-changing books that I've had, and it's going to have a ton of application to health and fitness and turning pro in your health and fitness. But then the other thing that we're going to add is weekly Zoom yoga classes taught live by the different people on the Down Dog Athletics team. So you're going to have a ton of value in this program. As I mentioned, you can go to www.downdogathletics.com and just click the main link right in the center to learn more about that. You can also find the link on Paul_Klingen, or if you're listening to this on Apple iTunes, you should be able to find it in the show notes. But anyway, 8-week Mindful Muscle Challenge launching April 19th. Going to be talking a lot about it in the future. Go check it out, learn more. And other than that, let's get back to the podcast. I really love the perspective that mastery really is just the commitment to the practice of it and realizing that you never get there. Even today, you were talking about like white belt mentality, which I thought was super cool, and just realizing like there's always something to learn. And as soon as you think you have it figured out is like when you are the most lost, right? And so to that point, I wanted you to talk just a little bit about jiu-jitsu. I haven't had any mixed martial arts people on, and I listened to Joe Rogan. I listened to Jocko. A lot of friends who are really into MMA, and I enjoy it. But I've never been on the mat. I don't even know what gi is, but I hear that like all the time, right? So I guess I'll have you just start like, what do you love about jiu-jitsu, and like what does it teach you? And I kind of, from an outsider perspective, I kind of see it as chess, where it's a mix of science and art, and it can teach a lot of lessons. So interested in your perspective.
Great question. I was just talking about this last night with some of my guys. One of them was he wrestled in college, and he's kind of got out of the wrestling scene, and he's like, it's weird for me because when I went to wrestling to practice wrestling, I went to wrestling because I had a meet coming up or some sort of match or tournament. He's like, I come to jiu-jitsu to practice jiu-jitsu, just to practice jiu-jitsu. And I shared with him, I was like, look, guys, for me, because I'm a brown belt now, so a lot of them look at me like we have a black belt that oversees us, but they look at me as one of the leaders on the jiu-jitsu mat, even though I'm not directly coaching all the time. I was coaching prior to getting our new black belt, but they look at me as like a leader. And so what I shared with them was like, for me, jiu-jitsu is truth, meditation, and toughness, right? And now I say truth because you can't lie on the mat, right? That's why I encourage anybody who I talk to, like I'm going to encourage you to go check out a gym, like because, or really anybody listening to this, because on the jiu-jitsu mat, you can't hide from how you are as a person. Another person is going to try to choke you. They're going to try to smash you. And I'm going to say this in a positive way, right? Because most people are like, oh, that sucks. But I'm telling you that life lessons. You've got a guy with his hand on your throat. He'll let you go if you tap him, but you've got a guy with his forearm on your throat. How are you as a person? Are you going to just crumble and mentally explode? Or are you going to fight through that adversity and solve the problem? Right? It is chess. It's solving problems constantly. So when I say it's truth, is because I know exactly how a person is when they walk on the mat, how they display themselves in live sparring, and how they interact with other people. Right? Some of the best people I know are on the mat because I know who they are. They're like one of my core values is authenticity, and which is like when I was sharing how I am as a dad with all of my stuff, right? Like being authentic, like I'm trying to figure it out daily, right? But the reality about jiu-jitsu is like it shows how a person is, right? And you can't, that's really hard nowadays to find a person and to be like, I know how that person is. I know who they are. I know how they, how they think and how they speak. Well, I learned that about a person within a couple of weeks in jiu-jitsu. Now, when I say meditation, I actually struggled when I first started getting coached by Cody because he wanted me to meditate, and I had a lot of trouble with it. I couldn't shut my brain off. I couldn't stop. No matter how much I tried, I had one of our 90-day goals was I was going to meditate every day. I couldn't do it. Like after about a month of it, I just couldn't get my brain to stop. Now, since then, I've gotten a little bit better at it. But for me at the time, I was like, Cody, like I can't meditate. I'm failing miserably. And he was like, well, what other things do you do that is very calming to you? And I'm like, jujitsu. And he's like, what? And I'm like, when I'm on the mat and I'm rolling or I'm learning a technique, all I'm thinking about, like when you're meditating, you're thinking about your breath, you're thinking about your surroundings, the feelings of your body, you do body scans, all the different things. But jiu-jitsu is kind of similar in that I'm thinking about where do I need to put my hand? Okay, his hand is grabbing me here. What do I need to do to get his hand off? All of the kid stuff, all of the COVID stuff, elections, politics, people saying certain things about me, they go away. They go away for 90 minutes. Like a 90-minute meditation session. Are you kidding me? Like there's nothing better than that, right? So I say it's meditation because I have singular thoughts on the mat at any given time, and it doesn't really change very much. I never think about all the crap that I have going on when I'm on the mat. And then when I say toughness, I defined toughness one time, and I had this really cool way of saying it, and I've totally forgot what I had to. I'd actually have to go back and listen to a podcast when I recorded on it. But toughness is essentially doing things that aren't easy or convenient when they're not easy or convenient, right? So like true toughness is like there's this thing that I need to do. I know that it's going to suck. 75 hard as an example. There's this thing that I need to do. I know that it's going to suck. It's definitely not convenient right now. I'm going to go ahead and do that anyways. To me, that's toughness. That's showing that you are tough. Jiu-jitsu on the mat. This guy or girl is going to try to choke you. You've got to solve the problem. Can you handle it? Can you not crumble? Toughness, right? So I believe that those three things are jiu-jitsu, and I speak about it very philosophically, and some people do it because it's just a cool sport and they want to learn how to defend themselves and stuff like that. But I think once you surpass the beginning stages of this particular martial art, it turns into very much a very challenging cognitive thing, and the mentality and the mindsets that you gain from that are in my opinion, some of the best out there. And then it doesn't hurt, like the skill set of knowing that at any given time, if I needed to defend myself, subdue a person, protect my family, completely and utterly destroy somebody, like that doesn't suck either. But I don't walk around thinking that first. I walk around and somebody asks me about jiu-jitsu and I'm like, oh, it's toughness, it's meditation, and it's truth. And they're going to be like, what? It's not, you mean it's totally not this cool armbar? And I'm like, no, not at all. It's, I did jujitsu last night for 90 minutes and I got home and I was so relieved. I had like, sometimes I get these stress marks on my head because if somebody's like, taking your gi and they have your elbow and you get like these little stress bruises and they go away overnight. But I come home sometimes and I'm just got this busted up face or a busted lip. Last week I got poked in the eye. My eye was red and everybody was calling me the pirate and stuff like that. And, but I came home and my wife's like, damn, how was jujitsu? And it was great. But it's because like, I just got all this it's like a mental flush every time I train. And, yeah, I feel like I'm kind of rambling on, but essentially that's what it is to me. Yeah.
Dude, that's really cool. And how, like, the first thing, truth, I think is it just exposes who you are in the same way life does.
Mhm.
It puts you in like that pressure situation, and pressure always reveals the integrity. Think about like a building, right?
Mhm.
You put a bunch of pressure on that structure, you put a bunch of pressure on a squat, and it's going to reveal, right, where the weak points are. And I love how that was something that you articulated really beautifully. The meditation part, it's I noticed a lot of overlaps with anyone who's like, oh, running's my meditation, or maybe golfing's your meditation, where you're hyper aware and you're hyper present. And for anyone on this podcast, they're like, oh, I struggle with meditation. It's like, don't try and put your meditation into a box. I'm going to try and say something profound. It's not going to be profound, but it's like, put yourself in a situation where you can be hyper present and hyper aware. It can look like anything. And then it's like, great, now I have this framework for like meditation and like letting everything else go. And then
Yep.
toughness, to that point, I mean, full transparency, that's been my biggest thing. Like as an athlete, I'd always grow up and I'm like, oh, I don't want to go skiing. Like if I break my leg, that's going to affect my baseball career. And now I'm like, oh, well, if I get beat up in jujitsu, like how am I going to go train my clients? And so I'm always like, there's like always this reason. But to be frank, it's probably a few years out, but the more I notice whenever I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that, that scares me. Like that's how I'm like, okay, you need to go do that.
Mhm.
So you can count this as like the first indoctrination into it.
Good stuff, man. Yeah, I really think it's jujitsu has a high business wise, has a very high turnover in the initial stages. You get people that come in that see things on UFC, they walk into they walk into your training center, they come on the mats, and then they learn how really challenging it is. And how, if they're a person that shies away from things that are hard, or that um, maybe isn't the best person or treats people the best, or maybe they've been kind of a bully, they're in their life, and then they get on the mat and I'm going to say gets bullied, but you have people that come on that think they're very high level at something, and then they learn that they're not. Like I talked about my son who was like the talent guy, and now he's not. He's, that's that hard thing. You come on and you're like, now no matter what you say, no matter what kind of persona you put off, no matter how you think you show up, this is how you show up. And some people like what they see, and some people like that they don't like what they see and they want to change it. And then some people really like, and they're like, man, I am made up of what I thought I was made up of. And then you get to where like you get reps, right? So now you do it several times a week, and you get all these reps in doing hard shit, or getting challenged, or some days I'll go and I'm one of the higher level guys in the gym, and I'll just have the worst day. I'll get mauled by people that I usually don't get mauled, and I'm a 6'5" guy. I'm not used to, generally speaking, getting held down, getting choked, just being manipulated in a way, because I'm big, I'm strong, I've been training for a long time. But when I have those days, it's it's very enlightening for me. And I'll share a quick story, and I'll let you kind of add in what you want to add in. Last Tuesday, uh, I started to realize that I would shy away from very hard roles, hard training matches, because I didn't want to get hurt, or my eye was bothering me, or whatever it may be. So I would shy away from these hard matches. And usually when I'm driving home at night, I actually have a Jiu Jitsu journal that I'll write down things that I noticed about my session. And it's like my dear diary. Today, Nate choked me, like, but I write these things down because I want to just see if I can find any lessons in it, right? So I have my normal journal, I have my Jiu Jitsu journal. So I'm going home, and I was like, I shied away from every match that was a challenge today. I say I'm driving home. I drive home, I sit in my driveway, I ride in it, throw it in my bag, and go in the gym or go in the house. But I wrote it down, like, I shied away from all the hard matches today. And then I sat on it and I thought about it, and I talked to my wife about it, and I was like, I noticed today that I'm like, we got a really tough wrestler that just joined, and like, you're gonna feel kind of beat up after you're done. Not that he's like overly rough. He's just a strong guy. I'm a strong guy. Two strong guys clashing against each other is a lot of tension, a lot of stress. And I totally avoided him because like, I was like, I don't have the energy for that tonight. And I got home and I was like, I don't like that. So, I told my wife, I was like, on Thursday, I'm going to go at all the hard rolls the entire time. I'm not going to have a single easy one. Cause typically you'll roll with some lower level people first to get warmed up. And then, you'll roll with somebody that's harder towards the end, but only a couple of those. So I was like, I'm doing all hard rolls for now on, and I'm going to see what I work. So see what I'm worth. Now I got kind of beat up, but it was that cool. Like I noticed something that I didn't like about myself from a toughness or a truth standpoint. And I was like, okay, we're going to lean into that. And, did the same thing last night, and I woke up this morning, my elbows all hurt, I look kind of beat up, but I got better. I got better at jujitsu mentally and physically.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was a cool story that kind of went in line with that. That just happened pretty recently.
Yeah, the journaling, it's a little toughness audit. You're like, if you go and like writing it every month, you're like, oh, like the books are off. We got to go and adjust it. Whereas like your toughness is off. Got to go and adjust it. But you did that like within a day, which is super cool. Um, you did a little bit of MMA too, right?
Yeah, I fought amateur, so I fought. I did Muay Thai kickboxing smokers. I boxed amateur, and I did amateur mixed martial arts. And so I was 8-0 as an amateur. I always joke and say I'm a YouTube sensation. Like, there's some of my fights on YouTube, and I fought and pretty much destroyed everybody that I fought. And towards the end of my career, I got to the end of, like, because I had won middleweight titles, I had won two light heavyweight titles. So I fought at 185. I fought a bunch of my fights at 205. Fought one in heavyweight, and I got to this place to where I'd pretty much beat everybody in the amateur scene in my area that was worth anything. So I had a decision. I could either keep fighting for free at the amateur level, or I needed to go pro. And a lot of, at that same time, and it's funny looking back on it, because maybe it wasn't part of the plan for me. Maybe the universe, or God, whoever whatever you believe in, like the universe and God had another plan for me, because when I needed to make that decision, I had won two different light heavyweight titles. I had just completely destroyed a very high level dude at 185 pounds, and won that title. And my coach was like, dude, you need to go pro. Well, I was also going through a really terrible divorce and custody battle at the time. And I had my business going, and I was like, I can't handle all these things. Something's got to go. Fighting kind of sucks. Getting beat up, injured, black eyes all the time, all the training that goes in line with it. Maybe training 4 or 5 hours per day, 7 days per week, and fighting a custody battle, and trying to be there for my son and my business. Probably not the best use of my time, so I kind of just had to hang it up there.
Yeah. Well, the life cycle or lifespan of what you're doing now, at least, is a little bit longer. I don't like
For
this
sure.
the MMA careers, right? No one's fighting to 40, is there?
No, I actually just had this dude named Josh Tyler. We were actually training partners years ago in Virginia. He runs a company called Savage Gentleman, and we were talking about that a little bit. And he said, because he had fought professionally, and he was like, there's not a long game in martial arts unless you make it at the highest level. Because I mean, at most, like you can fight 2, maybe 3 times a year when you're at a very high level with like promoters and stuff like that. And he was like, you're making what, 5, 10, 15K per fight, and that's it. You got bills, you got stuff to do. Unless you get endorsements, or you have some sort of side hustle, like fighting's not going to pay your bills. And he pretty much, like, he's like, I had to make a decision to where I go in as all in on my business, or I continue to try this professional fight thing, and it's not really worth it. And he was like, and yeah, like you said, guys burn out 40s, low 40s, they're pretty much done. You can't beat a 21-year-old stud who has been training martial arts since he was 12. Who are you kidding, right? Now, obviously, sure, you could throw anomalies out there like your Randy Couture's and stuff like that, but that's probably not going to be you.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I would say in sports, it's never good to compare yourself to genetic freaks, because if you're a genetic freak, it'll make itself apparent, and if you're not, the folly of trying to chase that was very
sure.
dumb. Like, you'll get people, like, in from baseball analogy, you'll be like, "Oh, but Gary Sheffield does this with his swing," and it's like, are you like a genetic freak with insane bat speed? No. So let's get back to the basics.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
You bat like this. It doesn't matter how Gary Sheffield does it. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So with jujitsu, one of the things I had on a podcast was a runner, right? Running or time based sports is very fair. And when you talked about truth, that was also something that came up to me, where you can't lie. If someone's 10 seconds faster than you, they're 10 seconds faster than you. Whereas maybe you're playing a football game, ball bounces a weird way, ball goes through the hands, and it's like you can lose to a team that you're not really as good at. How much? Where does jujitsu fall on that spectrum? Like, is it revealing the truth in like how good you are every single time, or is there nuance to where someone could, like, maybe they slip or there's sweat, and all of a sudden you're like, how did I get into this chokehold?
good question. I think on any day, somebody can catch somebody else, but the range of error is significantly smaller as you get more advanced. Generally speaking, a higher belt is going to beat a lower belt, with the exception of there's also the age thing involved. I forget the exact calculation, but for like every 10 years, it's another belt actually pulled off their belt. So if a person's 60 in their black belt, they're they're probably they're probably rolling at the level of a purple belt, but they've been training for so long in their black belt. Does that make sense? So
Yeah,
that's a piece of it too. But in general, I think a higher belt is always going to beat a lower belt. But at any given time, if so the jiu-jitsu belts are white, blue, purple, brown, black, right? For adults. Generally, a white belt's not going to catch a brown, like I'm a brown belt. Generally, a white belt's not going to catch me unless I'm kind of letting them work and I didn't respect something, and they catch me. But generally, once they catch me, they're not going to catch me anymore, because now I know their trick. There's also the wrestling component. If someone's a collegiate wrestler and they come in and they're a white belt, they might catch some of the higher belts sometimes, right? Just because they're athletic freaks, they've been doing wrestling or some form of grappling their entire life. Some of the guys who've been wrestling that are in our gym, they wrestled from when they were like 6 years old up. Now they're 30, so like those things are there. Those movements and that body awareness is there. So anybody can catch anybody, but generally, I guess if I were to give like most, I guess the closest to an answer, they shouldn't. The gap is almost always apparent. Like I typically will always beat the same people. The people that beat me will always beat me. If they're leveling up and I'm leveling up at the same time, that gap will stay pretty consistent. But any given day, if a person, slept like crap or made a mistake or, maybe they missed the session where we went over techniques and they didn't know this one was coming, generally speaking, they're not going to.
Cool. Just got a few more questions, personality questions. I feel like I've asked a bunch of jiu-jitsu questions I've been meaning to ask, and now it just like finally aligned.
Okay.
So more like a little more personality off the cuff, but you finished like 90-minute jiu-jitsu roll. You had your like last day 75 hard, and you get a crush like your favorite meal. Like what restaurant, what kind of food is something that you're like, I love that, gotta have it.
I'm super generic. Cheeseburger, fries, and brownie, and I'm good, right? From anywhere. And I'm talking like greasy, like I want grease down my lip when I bite the cheeseburger type stuff. And Cajun fries from Five Guys.
Ooh,
I don't know what it is, but they just get me going. And ever since I was a kid, I've loved a good brownie and ice cream. And this is exactly what I ate after I finished 75 hard. So I went and got the greasiest cheeseburger I could find. And I'm a fitness guy, so don't judge me, guys. It is what it is. But, we got to eat, right? So I had cheeseburger and fries, and I hammered some vanilla ice cream and brownies. It's something that to this day, like just salivating thinking about it right now.
vanilla ice cream and brownies is actually one of the best combos. I actually had a brownie this morning, so no
Oh, that
judgment
boy.
it was one of my clients' birthdays tomorrow, and she brought me a brownie. I was like, this is the best setup and relationship ever. So I had a brownie as well. Cool. So you got one last AMRAP. And back to your point about the AMRAP, I remember hearing that on a podcast. I was like, that's such a cool way and approach to like, all right, I'm going to be so present in this moment that I'm going to get like, a million hugs. It's like, how many hugs can I get like when I'm like with my family or with my parents? Anyway, to that point, you got like a 5-minute AMRAP. You get to play one song that's just going to like get you through hell. What are you playing?
Let me think. Um, people are gonna laugh at me, man. But the so I'm gonna answer this two ways. One way is gonna be funny. The other way is gonna be more serious. The first way that's funny is Carly Rae Jepsen, "Call Me Maybe." It just, for whatever reason, just gets me going, man. I've been calling it my PR song for years.
That's
It's
funny.
funny. We were just out at Cody's spot doing our mastermind weekend, and there was like this thing where it was like 1 minute max deadlifts with your body weight. And
Yeah, I saw you guys doing that.
yeah, Cody was like, "What song do you want?" All the dudes were like, "Play Metallica, play Meek Mill, all these like crazy dude." And I was like, "Put on Carly Rae Jepsen." And he looked at me and he was like, "Absolutely not." but
That's funny.
but to me, I'm like, "Come on, man! Like you asked me, and that's what I wanted." So the funny one would be Carly Rae Jepsen. You put that song on, and it just takes me back to when I was doing the competitive CrossFit thing, and we're just hitting heavy snatches and cleans. My legs are toast. I'm sweaty. My thumb's all ate up from hook gripping the bar. Like that's what I think about. Probably on a more serious side, um, I'm a big fan of like an old school Christian screamo / metal band called Under Oath.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of them.
Sure, if you're familiar with them,
Did
their
you
song.
remember Audio Adrenaline?
Uh-uh.
Oh, that was another one I remember growing up with. It was maybe a little bit more rock, but anyway.
Yeah. I was in like the screamo. I played in a band 2 years ago, so like our band was very inspired by Under Oath. But they have a song called "Reinventing Your Exit," and when that song comes on, man, it takes me back to being at old school shows, and I'm in the mosh pit and they're playing, and I went to a show one time, I lost my shoe, and
No way.
walking out of the show, and I've got a sock and a shoe, and I'm just stumbling through the parking lot without my shoe, and everybody's like, "What happened?" I was like, "The show was good, man." So I think about that, and throwing that song on in a workout for me, just I get like this out of body experience to where I think about that stuff and my body's doing another thing. So that's probably the more serious one, but don't rule out Carly, man. You throw her on, stuff just gets going.
What's interesting about that is, if you like dive into the brain and how like tied memories and emotions are, is like both of those where
Mhm.
you're like those songs are tied to memories when your energy was at its highest.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like you're like, I'm just gonna like use this song to pull into that energy hook, and then
Hmm.
you just like pull it out of that memory. Because it's the same way for me. I'm like, when was I at a show where I was like, wow, I feel so alive? And then you put that on, and it's like you get that little like zzz, right in.
Smells do it for me too. Like if I smell certain scents, it takes me back to like a certain time or a certain place. Um, I actually use it sometimes in my meditation of like thinking about like a smell that brings me back to a certain memory or a song or something like that. So,
We got to get you a greasy cheeseburger scented candle.
mm. Yankee Candle. I know if you were listening, if you made a greasy cheeseburger candle, I'd buy 20 of them.
Oh man, that's the best thing I've heard. Last one. You get to have dinner with anyone, dead or alive. Uh, who are you gonna have dinner with?
Mm, man, that's a tough one. Dead or alive, have dinner with anybody. Uh, Without too much thought, probably Garrett White
Okay.
of Wake Up Warrior. That
Yeah.
guy just fascinates me, man. He, his intensity in things, how he takes a stand for things, his mind in business, his crazy ass story, like everything about that guy, which is why like I even with Cody kind of introduced me to him, but even being with Cody as my coach, I'm still a member of the Warrior Coaching Program. Like I subscribe to their apps and stuff like that. I listened. He does this thing called the Fireside Chat every week where he talks for 2 hours. He just goes off in this Facebook group for 2 hours about stuff. And to this day, since I've been in it since last April, I listen to every single Fireside Chat for 2 hours.
Wow.
And it's just something about him just gets me fired up. He, I'm sure the show's going to end and I'm like, oh, I should have said this. I should have said that. But just kind of thinking offhand, I would love to have a couple hours of Garrett's time and just ask him questions, just to pick his brain about stuff.
Yeah. And I'm pulling it back to the very beginning, or it's like you get at a dinner table with that guy. It's like think about how much you're gonna be like, wow, like in a good way comparison game, and then you're like, boom, I'm gonna just
I'm a level.
level up. You'd go from the truck with the extra spare tire, next thing you know, you got a monster truck and you're running over all the Audis and everything else.
Perfect. Perfect.
Cool, man. Well, dude, super fun. Glad we connected, and appreciate you coming on the podcast. Anything you got coming up? Anything that you're super excited about? Where can people find you? Awesome time to just share all that.
Yeah. The podcast is a good place to go. I actually have two of them. So one of them is called the Virtuous Fitness Podcast. That's where I talk mainly about, training and nutrition and stuff like that. My first love. And then the other one actually started off as like an all men's podcast. And
Saw
I
that.
actually started having a lot of conversations about jujitsu. And I was like, I want to talk about that. So I rebranded it and it's called Live, Fight, Lift. But the basis of that is personal development, uh, combat sports, and then training and how they kind of intermingle together. It's three things that I love more than anything in the world to talk about. So I was like, we're just going to talk about it on the show.
Are
So
those usually? Is that one usually off the cuff?
yeah, there's literally nothing planned. I just kind of go in and we go off. I actually just got one of my martial arts instructors. He's going to be the co-host on it with me, and he's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu and another like bright guy and interested in a lot of the things that I am. So I was like, doing a podcast by yourself is fun, but every time I listen to one where it's like a couple of hosts, I feel like I'm sitting in the room with them and we're having a conversation. So that's how I've kind of reframed that one. But it's I just kind of have a thought and I just hit my roadcaster and we start going. So those are two places you can follow me on social media as well. I'm at Coach Cody Smith on Instagram, and then later this year I'm actually going to be launching a coaching program. So it's going to be for COVID pretty much showed our gym that there was like a gap for like knowledge-based stuff for CrossFit like coaches. So, with outside of the CrossFit level one, where do you go to learn about CrossFit like stuff? You don't, right? And I've had this completely amazing opportunity to be around a bunch of people in training and take it and spin it into a functional fitness CrossFit like workout program. A little bit different than, Marcus Philly has his functional bodybuilding stuff. And for me, I think I always talk about this thing called the science to fun continuum. Like
Hmm.
100% science isn't necessarily the most fun workout. And this training program is trying to bridge that gap to where like, well, it could be science and it could be fun. and it can be hard, and it cannot be so hard that it burns you out. So I basically am going to teach all the things that I've learned, and it's going to be geared towards the gym owner, towards the group fitness coach, anybody that would like to learn how to be the best possible CrossFit or functional fitness like coach from somebody other than CrossFit. And it's basically taking everything I've learned for years and applying it, and down to the business systems that we use, down to how we run our group templates, building workouts, building sessions. All of it is going to be my brain, and I'm dumping it. I'm actually building it for the interns that come through our gym to get certified in our stuff. My goal is to get it accredited to where you won't need a CrossFit level 1 to coach at a CrossFit gym. You could get the functional, I don't even know what I'm gonna call it yet, but the goal is the end of the year to have that out, and it'll start off initially as just a course online, but I'd like to actually do some in-person stuff to where people can actually come to our gym and learn from us, and then see where it goes from there.
Yeah, that'd be cool. It's interesting that you had obviously all the CrossFit drama and what happened. We won't get into that, but it's like
Yeah.
there's been a little bit of a convergence of like, all right, strictly CrossFit, and then it's like, what else can we introduce a little bit so it is maybe a little bit more Gen Pop friendly, or just like isn't like strictly CrossFit. So that'll be super cool, and I'll keep an eye out for that as well.
Cool, man.
All right, dude. Thank you so much for the time, and go have an awesome day.
Same to you, brother. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Before I let you guys go, just want to say thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you are interested in the Mindful Muscle 8-week challenge, just want to send a reminder, go check that out on downdogathletics.com, or peep my Instagram pages, Facebook pages. You can peep the show notes in this podcast and learn more about that. That's going to be launching April 19th. Would love to have you. And then other than that, if you love the podcast, be sure and subscribe, leave a review, help me grow the podcast, help me get awesome guests, and have awesome conversations like the one that we had today. Other than that, I'll catch you guys next time on the Mindful Muscle Podcast.